So this is a night photography, obviously, workshop. And my husband, Mike, is also going to help me. He's going to he put together something about astrophotography. He's gotten very interested in that. And you'll get to see his very first photo of the Orion nebula. So very excited for that. So hopefully you'll enjoy that part. But the first part is kind of what I've gone over before. Every time I do these, I learn new stuff and it just seems to multiply. So I try to simplify so that I don't overwhelm everybody. So this is a time lapse of the Milky Way over Big Bend, and it was assembled in Lightroom. It was 110 images taken in RAW with an ISO of 4000. It's about 25 seconds. So it's very, very small. But time lapse is also something I talk about because you can see the movement of the sky overhead, which is, once you learn, your night photography and you get kind of bored with the single shots and stuff, you want to expand your repertoire of what you do in the night, and time lapse is one of them that you can do. So just a simple introduction. Since the invention of electricity, modern man is at a disadvantage with our stargazing. Walking outdoors in Houston on a clear, dark, moonless night, we are lucky to see the Big Dipper and Polaris or the North Star. Yet we yearn to see more, much more, and to record what we see. Today we can view dark skies. To view dark skies, we must travel away from the light polluted cities. However, all dark skies are not the same. But today's camera sensor technology is allowing us to see these hidden stars with our cameras in less than optimum darkness. With the new camera sensor sensitivity, we can photograph many more stars than the eye can see, bringing the night sky to life with our photographs and allowing us to reconnect with the cosmos. And with this workshop, I'm going to talk about the fundamentals, how to get started. I am assuming that you all have a DSL camera, that you have some lenses, you have the basics, so that I'm not really going to talk about what camera's best, what sensor's best. I'm just going to say, this is the equipment that you have that you want to go out. Let's take that equipment, go out, see if you like it, see if you enjoy it, and then you can move on from there. So I'm hoping that you learn something that will help you decide and become, enjoy your night sky photographs in the future. So what we're going to talk about is getting started. Basic camera settings, composition, types of shots, post-processing. This is something that I never really got to the last time. The deep sky astrophotography with Mike, final review sources. And then in the summary, I've included some of the information that I had in a previous PowerPoint for photo pills, because that is something that you mentioned, Chuck, about doing a workshop on photo pills, and I think that would be a really good idea. Yeah. That is, photo pills is so essential to doing night photography, or any photography really. So if you photograph landscapes, you're chasing the light. You're chasing the light in night sky. It's just that you have different parameters with which you can chase the night sky. The cameras that you have, DSLR, mirrorless, and the newer smartphones can all take night sky photography. The bar is really at 6400 ISO. Anything lower than 64 can be even more challenging. It needs to have capability of RAW, shooting in RAW, and shooting in manual mode. You will not use any auto functions at all while you're shooting in the night skies. Oh, and one other thing, if there's any questions, just speak up and let me know, and I'll try and answer your questions. Sorry, I should have mentioned that before. Okay, vocal length. Vocal length is very important because if you want a wide angle, you want the whole landscape to show. And also, when you're using a 14 millimeter, 10 millimeter, the stars are so far away that their movement is very imperceptible. When you have a 50 millimeter, the stars are moving much faster, and you have to reduce your ISO, you have to increase your ISO, and of course, you're always working at the largest aperture for whatever lens you have. So there are constraints. So starting out, if you have a lens that's down to the 14 millimeter for a full frame, or 10 millimeter for APS-C camera, and then 4/3 at 60 millimeter or shorter. So the longer the focal length, the faster the shutter speed for star points, which is what we're really looking for. You can see this was shot several years ago in Arches National Park, and you can see the stars. Now, one thing I will say that when we get into the shutter speed itself, the corners of your camera, some lenses will have more distortion in the corners. And even I've seen some of my stars look like little fat sausages up there. So it's always a balancing. So the aperture f-stop, the fast aperture, which is wide open, will allow you to capture the star points with less ISO noise. And f2 allows twice as much light as f4. So that's, if you have a camera that you're starting at f4, you're already starting kind of at a disadvantage, you can do it, and you can just raise the ISO, and then you can go into post-processing and you can make some adjustments there to kind of get rid of the noise. But the lower you go, the wider open you can go, the better. One of the essentials for doing night photography is a tripod and a ball head. And that is, every book that I have read said, think good equipment, think sturdy equipment, but you got to bring a tripod. One of the books I was reading, he mentioned that he has he does workshops for night photography, and they come with a very nice camera, a very nice lens, and a very cheap tripod. So it's very difficult to get stationary with a cheap tripod. So think quality tripod, because the tripod is not something that you're going to buy every couple of years. The camera manufacturers, it seems like every 2-3 years, you're like, oh, I want the biggest and the greatest and the more megapixels or whatever. But the tripod, you buy a good tripod, it's going to last you forever. So considerations when you're looking: height and weight. Mike is very tall, so he needs a tripod that's going to get up there in height. And you want to make sure that you're not going to have to raise the center post of the tripod, because that creates unstable conditions, and it could cause more, there could be more motion, which would blur the stars. So think about the weight and the height. The weight would be considered if you do a lot of traveling. We travel with our tripods. My tripod goes into my suitcase. So considering the fact that 50 pounds is basically the limit, I'm sitting here, juggling, and I'll put in more camera stuff than clothes at some point. So do think about size and when it collapses, and material, the aluminum or carbon fiber. Carbon fiber are usually your travel tripods. They're lighter. Aluminum is heavier. Load capacity. If you're doing some of the night photography things and you've got a equatorial mount and you've got all this stuff, you need to have a tripod that's going to take that kind of a load. And then ball head. If you look at the Really Right Stuff ball head to the right, this is a Acrotech Ultimate Ball Head. And one of the, I never thought of this, but one of the comments that was made in a video that I was watching, it said that when you're setting up your tripod, put the lens, see if you can see this. The lens, this is what attaches the camera to the ball head. Put this in the front so that when you're in the dark, the knobs to adjust the tripod are in the back, so you're not confusing, so you don't accidentally unhook your camera and have the whole thing collapse on you. I thought that was a rather good piece of advice. Now, my piece of advice is Really Right Stuff makes an L plate. I'm sure there's other companies that do too, but I will swear by this. Like, not only does it allow me to have a quick release, but I have my Canon Mark D3, and I think I dropped that thing half a dozen times. And when it dropped, it fell on the L plate, which saved the camera body. So I consider whatever I spend, and it's less than maybe 120, $125. Whatever I spend on that is insurance for my camera. So this is, and you can flip very quickly from landscape to portrait mode with your camera. Now, how do you, when you're in taking photos, when you want to make sure you're not causing too much vibration? So using an intervalometer or an external shutter release is really, really important. If you don't have that, then you can always use the, within camera, you have a 10-second delay and you have a 2-second delay. You could use a 2-second delay. But buying one of these and can be very expensive, bless you. You can be very inexpensive. It doesn't take much to set them up once you set them up. Now, when I bought my camera, my 5D Mark IV, I always had one of the, like a shoot intervalometer. It didn't work. And come to find out, for whatever reason, the Canon 5D Mark IV will only use a Canon intervalometer, which is twice as expensive, 3 times as expensive as the others, but you don't really have a choice. I don't. So one of the other things that I do, which is not on here, and I'll see if you can see it. You can buy these little legs. It's like a little attachment to your tripod, and you can put your intervalometer in it. And so my intervalometer, let's see there, is always on my tripod, no matter where I go. I don't take it off. So if we're sitting on the beach in Hawaii, and I've got the tripod and we want to do a picture of the two of us together, then I have the intervalometer. Now, when I said you could use the in-camera second delay, that only works if you're doing like a single shot or something that's under 30 seconds, at least for the cameras that I have. The most cameras have a maximum of a 30-second. So if you want to do star trails, or if you want to do foreground illumination, something that's going to be longer than 30 seconds, you have to use this. When we went to, you have to get one of these. When we went to Big Bend, TJ specifically said, do not bring a phone intervalometer because there's no cell phone there. So if you brought something that was going to be using the phone or needed an internet connection, it wasn't going to work. So he specifically said, make sure you bring a wired intervalometer. Something to think about. Okay, now other accessories, and I'm not going to go through all of these because there's quite a few. And you may or may not need some of these, like we're heading to Utah next week, so warm clothes is going to be essential. The dual headlamp here is excellent when you are walking with all your equipment. It's nice to have the light on your head rather than having to hold the lamp. When you're looking at your pictures, this is a loop, and it allows you to look through the LCD after you've taken a picture, and you can actually see if you've got the pinpoint stars and if you need to change your focus a little bit. One of the things that was mentioned recently, if you're doing low light photos, LLO, and we're going to talk about that also, is this little Goal Zero Lighthouse Micro, which is rechargeable. I just got this, so I'm going to be using this in Utah, and I'll let you know how it works. But you can also use your phone, LCD screen. And of course, if you're going to be out with dew, and Houston has a lot of dew, there's a lot of places that will collect dew on your lens. You really need to get some kind of a warmer. You can use the hand warmers that you use for skiing and stuff, but sometimes those don't always work. And there's some, pardon me? They're not very expensive, and if you're going to be out all night, it's just nice to know that you're not going to ruin your shots by having the fog collect or the dew collect. Now, one other thing, we went to South Dakota, William Patterson, I always carry this because when we're doing night photography, we need something maybe to sit on or to set things on. So this is your, it's a little, I thought I put it on here, but I don't see it on there. Anyway, it is a little stool. It's a rhino stool, and it's not very expensive, and it folds up and it goes in the suitcase, and it's not very heavy. And it really has come in handy. That's something that you might want to consider. There's also portable stools, and if you're going to be all night, you don't want to stand all night, so you can get those. But this is what we bring with us. And gaffer tape. Gaffer tape is something that I use for my lens. I've used it for a whole bunch of other things, but I've had this roll probably 5 years, and it wasn't very big to begin with. So you don't need a lot. So one roll goes a long way. So you can go over these and make your own notes, and we'll, as you go through night photography, you just kind of know what you need to bring. So basic camera settings. One of the things they talk about is turning down your LCD brightness or replacing it with a red filter on the back. But your sensitivity to the light, when it takes you about 20 minutes for your eyes to actually get accustomed to the night. And when you're looking at the HDR range of your eyes versus the camera, your eyes at night have a much wider range of the HDR than your camera does. But when you're using a light, it affects that for a period of time. Now, one of the things that they always talk about using the red on that dual headlight, the red. Well, that red can affect your photos, even if the person is behind you. Part of the etiquette of when you're out working, when you're taking photos with other people, is saying, okay, can I turn on my headlight? Because you can be doing a picture and you turn on the headlight and it can ruin, I mean, literally that red will ruin your headlight, your picture. When we were in Fort Davis, we were staying at a place called Rock House, and probably 400, 500 yards, 1,000 yards was a RV park. And they had, one person had blue lights on his trailer. And I thought, well, you know, it's way over there, won't take any picture. You would be surprised what those kind of lights do to your photos. But one of the things that I will mention here before we go much further is using a very small light. I will use this if I need to look at the back of my camera. I'll use a small light, and I will put my hand over the light so that I'm making a snoot with my fingers. So I'm very, very little. This light is not going to affect somebody else's photos. I'll also hold a tea light very close to my, whatever I'm doing. Again, this light is a very low level light. It's enough light for me to see if I'm fumbling around looking for a button. This light's enough. So these things I keep in my pocket all the time while I'm out there so that I have another light. Now, white balance. What do you set your white balance to? As I said, nothing is on auto. I like Kelvin 3400. That gives you a nice blue tone. You can even go up to 4,000 Kelvin, which is kind of like, daylight is a little different, but since you're shooting in RAW, once you get to post-processing, you're going to be setting it at daylight. But daylight on the back of your LCD is kind of an orange look to it. The Kelvin 3400 to 4000, that is a nice blue look. And to me, it's much more pleasing. ISO, never use auto. You're gonna have starting settings. When you get out there, it's like, oh my God, it's dark. You can't see anything. So we'll talk about settings, but you're never gonna use auto. RAW, always shoot in RAW. That gives you the whole color spectrum that you want. And turn off autofocus and auto stabilization. You do not want, if your camera now, the lenses that I use, the Rokinon, they do not have any kind of image stabilization. So it's not good. But if you have a lens that has image stabilization, turn it off. One, you're on a tripod, so you'd never use it on a tripod anyway. But two, that tiny movement is going to blur your stars. And then your histogram. When we were in South Dakota, I mentioned to Tim and to Steve to look at the back of your camera after you take your pictures, and look at the histogram. You look at the LCD and you think, oh, I've got enough light. But then you get home and you put it into Lightroom or whatever you're putting it up to, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, where are the stars? It's dark. So don't depend on your LCD. Use your histogram. That will give you the best indication that you have enough light. And then there is something in cameras that is called the long exposure noise reduction. And what this is camera is automatically taking a second shot with the shutter closed for the same length of time as the first shot. So basically it doubles the length of the photo. So if you're taking a 20-second shot, it takes another 20-second of dark and puts the two, so it's a 40-second shot. So what is it doing? It's a dark frame subtraction. It reduces the hot pixels. It's good for single shots of the sky or foreground shots. I just read where one photographer also uses it for star trails, where he does a 30-minute to an hour star trails with the dark sky with the long exposure noise reduction. And my thought was, would my battery last? Because what happens if the battery dies in the middle of the dark sky? So I don't know, I'd have to look into that, but he does use it for star trails. You would not use it for any time-lapse photos, because the time-lapse, again, is taking a photo very quickly, one after another. And if you're star stacking, you do not need it. And do not use for panoramas, because again, you want to meld them together and you need to take them very quickly. So having a second shot for dark is not going to help. So this, for my Canon, this is where it's located, and you just have to turn that off. Over here, you can see some of the examples of the long exposure noise reduction and how it darkens, and you can see the pinpoint skies better, especially on the second one and the ones at the bottom. And what are some of the challenges? Well, the quality of the light is very dark, very dim to dark. I mean, it is dark. You go into Big Bend and you cannot see anything. So one of the first things I do is, as I'm walking to put out my tripod, I'm taking these little tea lights and I'm making a little trail for me so I can see where I'm going, because you get out there and it is so dark. You're looking for something that is a like a milepost, or something that will tell you where you're going. So these are great. The other thing is, you put your tripod in the middle of a field and you put this light underneath it. One, you're making people aware that there's a tripod there because they can see the light. And two, you can find it, which is even more important. So things can get lost in the dark. The camera settings that you need to overcome this lack of light is your ISO sensitivity, the f-stop determined by the lens you're using, whether it's a 1.4 to 2.8 or 3, and your shutter speed. So the goal for night photography is to balance all three of those. The f-stop is basically determined by your lens, so you're not going to be able to adjust that because you want it as wide open as possible. The shutter speed is going to be they're restrained by the fact that the Earth is moving. So the stars are moving. And in order to get pinpoint stars, you cannot have a 40-second or 50-second shutter speed. You've got to have something less than 30 seconds for pinpoint stars, unless you're on an equatorial mountain. That's completely different. So ISO is really the only thing that you can use that's going to, you can up it or lower it to give you the sensitivity you need when these other two are constant. So ISO, sensitivity of camera sensor. So the higher ISO, the more camera noise, but shorter exposure times, less camera noise, but longer exposure times. So you can see the shot was a 25,000 ISO. This was it's called a throwaway shot. When you get it, you're looking for your composition. It's very dark. You've hopefully scattered out in the beginning of the day, so you kind of know what you're looking for, but you still need to make sure that you've got the balance between sky and earth and whatever else you want in the photos. So you do this throwaway shot. So you can see the noise between the two of them. The 6400 is much less noise, and the 60 than the 25,000. Down here, you can see the histogram. One of the things that you want when you're looking at the histogram on the back of your camera at night, you want to make sure that you've got the lines going all the way towards the middle. You don't want all of them over here. Oops. You don't want all of them on the dark side. You want to see them. Now, this is coming from Lightroom, so it's not quite the same, but give you an idea. You want to get some pixels in this range on your back of your camera histogram. Then you have the f-stop, which is the amount of light entering your lens. And some of the, to the right are some of the lenses that have been recommended many times. And if you notice, they all have f2.8 or better for those. I use the Rokinon 14 millimeter and a Rokinon 24 millimeter. This is the 14 millimeter, and I don't use it for anything else. So when we go traveling, this is in my suitcase. My focal point is taped down, focus point, so it's taped down. So I can just set this on the camera and just go for it. I don't have to do much else. But these are examples of lenses that if you don't have a lens, then you might want to think about these if you want to get into it. And this Rokinon is less than, I think, $300. It's not an expensive lens. Some of these are very expensive, but this one is very inexpensive. So the speed of the lens, widest aperture is important for night photography, and f2.8 or faster is preferred. Now, movement, how long the light hits your sensor, the short shutter speed, star points, longer shutter speed, star trails. And I'll show you examples of that. But this is, you go out with the idea of what you want. I will shoot with two cameras, actually. I'll have one set up for time lapse, and I'll do the other one for star trails. When we go to Utah, and getting ready for this workshop, there's several types of photography, night photography, I really haven't done. So I'm going to be trying a few new things. So it's always kind of fun. Just sitting there doing one shot can get kind of boring. I mean, the first time you get the Milky Way, you're so excited. And then it's like, now what can I do? So, but remember, you want pin tack sharp stars. And that is a must for a really good night photography photo. And then autofocus. There are several ways to do it. And the way I have done it in the past is I will, during the day, if I want to check the focus on my lens, I put it on my lens and I take a photo, like of the mountain in the foreground and, far away. And then I'll download it to my computer and look at it to make sure. And I'll tape the barrel down, the focus ring down, so that it can't move. And I think the last time I focused this was a year ago in Utah, and I've checked it, photos with it since, and it still seems to be good. Now, you can autofocus on a bright distant point street lamp and then switch to manual focus. And that's very important if you have autofocus on your lens. You can manual focus with a live view and zoom. Mike, on the back of his camera, he does focusing. His camera actually has things that help him focus at night. So he uses the live view. On location, let's see, you can place a flashlight far away and use that as a focus. Or as you could do, as I do, check the focus during the day and then tape your lens on the focus ring. The shutter speed is limited by the rotation of the earth, and you definitely, your shutter speed is going to be 10 to 30 seconds max, depending on the focal length. So there are programs that you can use. I've talked about the PhotoPills app before, and this is a screenshot of the PhotoPills app with spot stars. And they use the NPF rule, which if you look down here, they have both the 500 rule, which a lot of people have used in the past, and the NPF rule. So you have a choice and you set it to accurate. I started using, I still kind of go with the 500 rule, but I'm going to try the MPF rule simply because I see those fat sausages in the corner. The sky exposure is your ISO 3200 to 6400. And the difference is if you have any kind of moonlight or any other light that's actually making a kind of all over your landscape, then you probably going to try lowering the ISO. When you get out there, you're probably going to start shooting at 6400 and then check your histogram and then move it down to where you've got a good balance with your shutter speed, aperture, so that you've got enough light signal so that you've got a good solid picture. Star stacking is combining multiple shots for lower noise in post-processing, and those would be post-processed in a Mac with Starry, Landscape Stacker, and Windows Sequester Deep Sky Stacker. When Mike gives his talk, he has to use this. He's taking 76 photos and he's stacking them, so he'll have more information or he can answer questions on that. And the noise will be, in star stacking, the noise will be like a single exposure, but much less noise. So 10 shots, 10 seconds each equals 100 seconds of light, where a single shot is maybe 30 seconds or less of light. So it gives you a lot more light to deal with, to take a picture. And that's the other thing that I'll try this in Utah. Planning basics. This is for the Northern Hemisphere. If you're planning to go to the Southern Hemisphere, then you would need to do some research because their stars are very different. When is the Milky Way? If your focus is the Milky Way, you want to go when the Milky Way is visible. So from February to October, November, the Milky Way is visible in the sky. However, it is aligned differently. Earlier in the years, the Milky Way is like an arch, and you see a lot of photos that are taken and the Milky Way is arched over something. Those are springtime photos because during the year when the Milky Way comes up, it's kind of straightening up like this. So eventually it's diagonal. And so you'll see pictures of they have a rock in front of them or whatever, and the Milky Way will be up and down. And that is later in the year. So summer, it's a vertical. Sagittarius is next to the Milky Way core. So if you're trying to find it, again, photo pills. We definitely need to use that. Maybe this is something that we can talk about for all of you who are going to Fredericksburg. I was going to see if we can get a room there where we could talk about photo pills. And if you can purchase that, it's like $9 and they have so many different YouTubes. It's really well spent. They have an augmented reality that you can actually go there. If you look to the left, the picture shows what the augmented reality does. And you can scroll at the bottom, you can scroll with the time so that you can see when the Milky Way is coming up, when it reaches. And it's just these guys, the person who invented photo pills has done photographers an amazing favor. And then you want to check for the lunar cycle, because you want to shoot in the new moon. One of the reasons we're going to Fredericksburg when we are is because it's the new moon. Or the darks, you can shoot 5 days before the new moon and 5 days after the new moon, and the skies are dark enough to see the Milky Way. As soon as the moon comes up, the Milky Way just starts to fade into the sky. So you want to be able to maximize. And of course, you really are praying for clear skies. You can't do Milky Way if you got cloudy skies. So that can just blow all your planning away. And when do you, time-wise, when is the optimum time? 2 hours after sunset, 2 hours before sunrise. And that's because that's when you have the astronomical time. The astronomical time refers to how far the sun is below the horizon. So astronomical, the sun is far enough away from the horizon that it is not affecting the horizon at all. Nautical and civil, the light is coming more and more, the sun is coming more and more closer to to the horizon, eventually to sunrise. We're going down to the horizon for sunset. Now you can shoot in twilight. You can get Milky Way shots in twilight. There won't be as definitive, but you can do that. That is another thing you can do. And these are just some of the apps that I have used in the past. The light pollution. This is one. Photocast is another one that I use. It's a weather forecast app, but it's for photographers. And in it, you can tell it that, hey, I like astrophotography. So it will actually tell you, if it will give you a little heads up, tonight's a great night for astrophotography. So I was using that in Hawaii to tell Mike, yeah, tonight's a great night. Let's go out and take photos. So it has other features too, but I've really started using that a lot more. You do need a weather app of some sort to make sure that you're not going out and then the storm's going to come up, especially if you're going into areas that are off road, that you're walking into the bush somewhere. So you want to make sure that you're prepared, and that if there's possibility of bad weather, that you're up alerted to it. The photographer's ephemeris also helps plan. I don't use that as much, but I do use it for just direction of sun and direction of moon, and it allows you to put a pin. PhotoPills does the same thing, but it allows you to put a pin. Now, the photographer's ephemeris is an Apple, originally was an Apple. Then they developed one for Android. I use Android. I went from the Apple phone to the Android, and I realized I lost a lot of basic functions with the Android. So the Apple photographer's ephemeris might be still fully functional, but the Android does not do near what it used to. And of course, the PhotoPills, which is fantastic. Now, if you're looking at meteors, lunar eclipse, solar eclipse, PhotoPills has an ability where you can load that and then you can do research on it. So we'll talk about that also, because we in Texas have a solar eclipse coming in 2024. And I think, that should be something that the club would be interested in doing. And also for a lunar eclipse, we have a lunar eclipse coming up on May of this year. So the PhotoPills app will allow you to see where in that augmented reality, where the moon is through the night, so that you can make sure that you don't have, during the full eclipse, you don't have a tree or something hanging in the middle of it. So it's really, I can't, $9 is like 2 cups of coffee or 1 cup of coffee, so it's worth it. And then a star tracking app, which Mike uses a lot of, so he can talk about that. And then I'm not going into all the steps which I did before, but I've included them at the back end. But the YouTube videos by Brenda Petrella, how to plan a Milky Way photo shoot, is really excellent. And I would recommend you take time to look. If they're not very long, you can probably watch all 3 of them within an hour. But she has quite a few YouTube videos about photography, but that one in particular was something that I appreciated. Okay, composition tips. How am I doing for time? All right, so you're going to begin each session with a test shot to check composition, and that is an exposure, a very high exposure, very fast, like 2500 ISO, 8 seconds, 2.8. And this is basically just to set your camera up, take a shot, look at it, and say, okay, I want to move this, take another shot, get your camera set, and then be sure and put your camera into your keeper photos. Lower your ISO to start it out at 6500 with maybe 30 seconds and f2.8, take that shot, and then decide if you've got too much star trailing, whatever, and then reduce the seconds. So, you play with it a little bit. Once you get out there, you kind of get a feel for it. If there is any, like a quarter moon or something, that's also going to affect the Milky Way, but it's also going to affect the landscape. So you may want moonshots. So we'll see. Anyway, check your composition on the LCD and repeat until your composition is acceptable. And then change the settings. If you're going to shoot a foreground, which I will say I've never done that. So this is something that would be new. The starting settings that I read was ISO 1600 with a 1 to 10 second shot. Actually, I think that's 1 to 10 minutes, not seconds. That's a typo at f2.8. So that's a long exposure, and it is amazing the kind of, you have two things. You have the low light level illumination, and then you have someone who wants to use natural light only, and so they will blend those photos together. And then change the settings for sky shots, determine doing one shot or if you're doing 10 shots. So this is all things that you're going to plan out ahead of time so that you know what your settings are going to be, so you're not sitting there fumbling around in the dark, because as I said, it is very dark. Are there any questions so far? I'm sorry. No? Okay. All right, so the types of shots that you can look at: the single shot, the blending foreground shot with 10 single shots stacked, star trails, time lapse, which is also a good way to get meteors, because you're out there. I went specifically in August to Enchanted Rock because the meteor shower was happening. And of course, your camera is never pointed in the right direction. And some of the meteors were quite bright. I did get one of them like that, but the time lapse allows you to be taking pictures. And I did capture a couple of meteors during the time lapse. The nightscapes with low level lighting, moon shots, total eclipse and total eclipse of the moon, and panoramas. I don't really talk about panoramas. I've done a couple, and you can read about it, but basically that's taking, just like a landscape panorama, you're taking very quickly, overlapping 40 to 50% and moving over, and then either in the portrait mode or landscape mode. Most of the time they say portrait mode, but you're just moving it across and then stitching it in Lightroom or some kind of a Photoshop. So single shot. This is the best way to start. If you've never started shooting with the Milky Way, I think this is the one that would get you excited. The first really good Milky Way shot I took was in Hawaii at the 9,000 level where the visitor center is. And I was looking for it to kind of show you, but my daughter had it up on her Facebook for a long time. And I look at that and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the sky is too dark. I mean, I was so excited though, because I had actually got the Milky Way. So compose your shot using the steps that we've already gone over. Use for your shutter speed, either use the NPF rule or the rule 500 rule or 300 rule, depending on the camera that you have. And you can see at the bottom down here, there is some calculations already done for you, depending on the focal length of your lens, the seconds for your shutter speed, and the 500 rule for the 14 millimeter, it says shutter speed 36 seconds. I don't think I would ever put it at 36 seconds because I have seen too much motion. So different cameras obviously record differently. So these are starting, and check your LCD. Look for star trails. If there's star trails, then try and cut back on the shutter speed so that you can get it at least in the center of the picture, for sure. And then wide open your lens. Your ISO for no moon, this one person said 5,000, you could still do 6,500. There's a partial moon, then 3,200. White balance, again, Kelvin, daylight, or Kelvin 3,400 to 4,000. Use camera delay or shutter release, and check the histogram and adjust your settings accordingly. Blending foreground with sky shots. You're going to take one foreground shot with the sky photos. So you set up your shot, camera stays in that position for all shots, so that when you do the blending, they're going to match. So you're basically just changing the settings on your camera. You're not moving your camera. And again, a sturdy tripod is really, really essential for this, because if your camera gets off just a little bit, then it's going to cause you problems in the blending. So for a foreground shot, And this is correct. This is the minutes. So the foreground shot, it's the same focus as the stars. It said you could focus stack if needed, and you start your point ISO is 1600, the largest aperture of your lens, and between 1 to 10 minutes, and check histogram after shot. So you could start at whatever. I've not done this, so I'm just relaying to you what I have read. So this is, to me, this is interesting because the shots were quite impressive, actually. And then to do the sky shot, it's take 10 sky photos, and then you will combine those using a star stacking program, and then upload the foreground shot and the finished star stacked photo to Photoshop to blend the two. And I'm sure Chuck is going, oh yeah, that's easy peasy. So, and then finish processing in Lightroom. So that to me would be really, to me, that would be a challenge. I'd probably have to say, Chuck, blending. I am still like all thumbs with Photoshop. After all these years, for whatever reason, I have a mental block with Photoshop. So anyways, this is one that I specifically want to do in Utah. And depending on my results, then I can talk about that in Fredericksburg to everybody who comes there. So star trails. I love star trails. This is another, when you get tired of doing single shots, it just gives you a different look to the whole night. And to me, it's interesting. So when we did the workshop in Big Bend with TJ Avery, he had a set of instructions, and poor man, he passed away, but before he died, I asked him if I could use some of these for a previous workshop. He says, yeah, no problem. So these are coming from him, his handouts, but these are starting points. I like the 400 ISO, 2.8, 15 minutes, because it's not too long. I don't have to worry about the sensor, and then I'll combine it, which I will show you an example of that. The man who was doing star trails with the noise reduction as the second step, he was doing 30 minutes. And then in one port, he did 60 minutes. So these are starting points, but it's an interesting thing to do. So how do you get the patterns? The Polaris is north. And if you're facing north, you're going to get circular pattern. That's where you see those circles. If you're facing south, you're getting arching left or right. Set your camera to bulb mode. That's very important because you're going to be at least 4 minutes, which is way beyond what our cameras can do, at least my cameras can do. Turn off long exposure reduction. Plug in your remote shutter release intervalometer, and you're going to set that up for the number. Canon, for one reason, doesn't give you, you can do the shots, but I find I just leave that go and it just goes. And I just time it on my time and turn it off when I want it to turn off. But you're going to set it for a delay. And then you're going to set it for the amount of time interval. And then those are the two things that you're going to set it for. The exposure tables, check those out. And so it's delay, length of time, interval between shots, and number of shots is what you would set it for. The interval between shots, you don't want very long. You want maybe a second or two. You just want enough time for the SD card or CF card to save the data to get to the next one. You don't want it to have a backup issue there. And then sit back and enjoy the night sky while the camera does its magic. Now, how do you find the Polaris? You're using the Little Dipper, the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper points to the North Star. So, or you can get a sky app that will help you find it. Now, time lapse. This is you're going to compose your shot like you normally do. Turn off long exposure, definitely. Shoot in RAW. Put in a new battery and have a spare on hand. A sturdy tripod is a must. Manual mode, ISO auto off, autofocus off, stabilizer off. Plug in your remote internal shutter release intervalometer. And remember, the interval is always from the beginning of one exposure to the end of the next exposure. The normal exposure would be 12 to 30 seconds, nightscapes with wide angle or fisheye. Use photo pills or another time lapse to calculate the settings for the intervalometer. Start your camera and begin recording. Now, when we were in Enchanted Rock, this is a photo from Enchanted Rock. This was part of a 230 photo time lapse, ISO 2500, 20 seconds, 24 millimeters to 2.8. And this is a meteor. And you can tell a meteor when you're looking at your photo because it's got some color to it. So this was not a plane or whatever, it was the meteor. And then I use LR Time Lapse 6 basic program to combine all of these. And it was developed by a German man, and he really does a great job. And he also specializes in, they call it the holy grail of time lapse, where you're going from night to light, dark to light, sunrise to sunset, day to sunset. So those are more difficult because you've got changing, everything, the light is changing, and you have to make sure you don't overexpose based on the amount of light you have. So I have put one very small time lapse together of the night that we were on Enchanted Rock. And this is with the second photo. And you can you'll just, see if we can find, if you look right about here somewhere, you're going to see no, there, you just saw it. That was the meteor that went. Now, later in the night, I moved my camera a little bit, and we had a beautiful meteor, which I took a picture of. So that's something that with time lapse, that if you're looking for shooting meteors, you really have to do a time lapse to get them, because you're just not going to be able to be quick enough they're gone before you even get to the camera. Okay, nightscapes with low level lighting. This is, again, something that I have not done. And I know that we have had talks. Jay Magnum did a talk with using light painting. This is kind of like light painting, but a lot of the national parks, arches and canyonland no longer allow light painting, even though when we've been there, there's so many people out there that are still doing it. So they don't have a lot of oversight. The workshops that go into these cannot use light painting for certain. So the use of low level lighting is not discernible to the naked eye. And the pictures that I showed you of the LCD screens and this little micro, those are things that he uses for light painting. And he does recommend you use small light stands so that the light can sit on a miniature ball head, and you can actually adjust it so that it's hitting the portion of whatever it is that you want to light. And those images are from the Royce Baer low level lighting. He's kind of invented that low level lighting, LLL lighting. And reading his book, he's really very, very big into it. So it's something to, again, expand your night photography repertoire. And then moon. Now, this is something that we can do in Houston. We don't have to travel. In fact, the eclipse over here was done in my front yard, and that was in January. And I mean, talk about cold. But this was actually blended together using I think multiple mode or dark mode, I'm not sure. But anyway, and this was from the Royal Shores dock, which I've met John Gray there occasionally. So the moon is something that you can use to get familiar with shooting at night and have something that you can enjoy. So there's also moonscapes like this one from Arches. That's the Balance Rock with the LaSalle Mountains in the background. Very few stars really in the sky, simply because the moon was quite bright. I will also mention that if you're doing landscape lit by the moon, look at what's in front of you at the bottom part of your screen and your LCD, what you're taking a picture of. If you're taking a picture of a very dark area in front and then it goes to light, that's going to look like a big black hole. So I've learned that make sure that the light is even on the landscape in front of you so that you don't have any large dark holes in your picture. Tripod again, and the moon rising or setting for directional light. This picture here, the moon was rising behind it, but I was doing a silhouette. And I still had the Milky Way because the moon hadn't quite come up. So the Milky Way is still visible. And for moon photo opportunities, super moon at twilight, which is where this was, I took a course by Kathy Adams Clark. And she was saying actually the day before the full moon is really the best time to shoot the full moon with your landscape with it. Your that is, there's the sun is just setting as the moon is coming up. So you kind of have an equilibrium. So you get a lot more light on your landscape. And then the lunar eclipse I mentioned, May 15th through the 16th, 2022. So, and it goes, we will have the entire eclipse. The large one was the full moon at 600 millimeters, and it's still cropped even at 600 millimeters. So those are suggestions for moon. So,
hey, Kathy, what was the time lapse, or how long was the shutter open for the moon shot?
For this one here?
No, the one below it.
Oh,
one. Yeah.
Oh shoot, I'd have to look it up and tell you. I should have put it in there.
Yeah, because I assume because the moon's moving so fast that you gotta have fairly short shutter speed.
Yeah, the shutter speed was probably 1/200th.
Okay.
And you're right, I should have mentioned that. When you're, especially when you're using a 600 millimeter, that moon is moving really, really fast. And also it's so bright that you don't have to have really high ISO. You can, I think the high ISO at that was maybe 3200. I think it was 1/200th, and it was maybe f.6. I can look at it to verify, but I think that's kind of what I shot it at.
Thanks.
Okay, post-processing. This is the part that I've not gone over with you ever because we ran out of time. So, and I'm not going to show you examples. I'm going to walk you through. And when we go to Enchanted Rock, if we can get a computer and stuff, maybe we can work on examples there. But these are pretty self-explanatory that you will upload. And I'm using Lightroom. I also show Photoshop, but this one is Lightroom or Camera Raw. You're in Develop module. You're going to enable profile corrections if you don't do it automatically when your pictures go up, because you want to make sure that the corners of your photo are not bent or something. So you use that first. Then you put the white balance to daylight. So you're shooting with the LCD at night in a nice blue tone Kelvin, but when you are processing, because you're in RAW, you can change it to daylight. Using the tone curve, you're going to put photos in RAW. Step one is to do the RGB tone curve with 3 points and create a slight S curve. Then the second step is to click on the red channel, put 1 point midway inside the main peak of the histogram and pull down the reddish tones until the screen turns slightly green. Now, then you go to the green channel, and again, 1 point in the middle, and you pull it down until it turns slightly blue. And then you turn the blue channel and you put 1 point midway, and then you either pull it up to make it a little blue, you adjust your blue with that one. So after you've done your tone curves, you're going to go into your adjustment brush. You're going to brush the Milky Way with a contrast brush. You're not going to use a contrast throughout the whole picture because it makes it too it brings back noise. And then the basic panel adjusts sliders to your liking. Your under detail panel, you're going to adjust the luminance. Now you can go into, for the luminance, you can use Topaz AI. And I do use Topaz AI for adjusting the noise to get the pinpoint stars. Mike even used it for his photos. So you could eliminate this by using the Topaz AI. But if you don't have it, then just adjust the luminance. Make sure that you're not over adjusting because you lose stars. It softens and kind of blends everything over. And then you're going to go back to the, and always view this, kind of go back and forth. I go back to the full screen to see what it looks like. But the things you want to do is you've got color, noise, and detail and smoothness. These are all things that I adjusted. And then I went into sharpen is always kind of partially there. You might want to sharpen a little more radius. And then you may or may not want to do masking. So again, it's you get in there and you play with, I can't say this is for sure what you need to do. You need to just work on your own photos and get it to the point where you like what you see.
Kathy, just a question. Have you tried the Topaz products for the noise and sharpening?
That's what I was using. Yeah. Topaz denoise.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Did I not mention that? I said,
oh no, I thought it was Lightroom you here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's Topaz denoise AI.
All right.
And that is a great program. And it's good for birds too. It's good for anything and portraits. So this is the before and after. So again, the process is very subjective. This one is the original. So you can see the daylight is a very orange. And then this is for Lightroom processing. This was my final, and you've got the core here. This is what we're all wanting to shoot, is this core, because that is the most beautiful part of the Milky Way. And there's no right or wrong. It's all up to you. So Photoshop, you start with the raw image. You upload it from Lightroom or Camera Raw, and you do Control J for a new layer. You click on the tone curves in the adjustments panel, and you're going to do basically the same thing. You're going to put a point where the line and curves intersects in 2 ports to make the slight S curve. Then you're going to go through the red channel, the green channel, and you're again putting the point midway, and you're pulling it down for the red, down for green, and then up for blue. I don't think I have blue in here. So they're not using blue with this one. So you check the RGB, and you're going to use the spot adjustment tool to pick places on the photo, add 2 or 3 points to gently increase the contrast, and change blending layer to luminosity. I have not done this process since I put this together a couple of years ago, so I would have to go back and reread my notes. So I'm sure some of you would say, yeah, that's not a problem, understanding it all. So anyway, when I got done with it, this is the Lightroom, this is the Photoshop. So it is very different. I mean, they're both good, and that was the original. All right. Any questions with that? Hopefully, if I can't answer, maybe Chuck can.
Well, I mean, I just one little tip there. Why you use luminosity? If you do a layers or change levels or anything like that in Photoshop or Lightroom, it'll change the color slightly too. But if you do go luminosity blend mode, avoids the color change, basically color shift. So it just changes luminosity. And that's why you change that to luminosity blend mode.
Okay.
But that's just a little tip there. That's what blend modes do.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you. All right, so this is the long exposure star trails. This is Big Bend, and these were 4 15-minute photos, ISO 400, 14 millimeter, f3.2, 903 seconds, which I guess is 15 minutes. And these are saved to a special photo. These are uploaded into Lightroom, and then I chose these 4 and saved them to a special folder and uploaded them to a freeware called Star Stack. And this freeware allows you to combine these to create the star trails. So once you're in Star Stack, you will load the photos here. You will go over to the preference and you will click on gap filling. Now I did not have a dark image, a dark subtraction image. So that is something that you might want to do just to get rid of any hot pixels. So that's an option here, but I did not do that for this. So once it was done, this was the final, the combination. You can see here the stars are shorter, and so it's combined the stars. And then I went into Lightroom and finished it. I added, changed the color of the sky slightly, and the car trails are there. So this is a fun program. It is free. You just have to read the directions, and it's very simple to use. So now hopefully I haven't taken too much time. This is going to be, I have a video presentation for you of Mike in Hawaii talking about his equipment, and then he has a small PowerPoint that he'll go over all of his stuff. So I'm doing a short video with my husband, Mike, who's helping me with the night workshop that I'm doing to talk about his favorite subject, astrophotography. And we're filming it from the island of Kauai, which you can hear the waves in the background, and we have wonderful light here and beautiful stars at night. So we thought this was an excellent spot to start. So I'm going to introduce Mike, who is standing in front of the camera, to take over from here.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm a little embarrassed to be showing all this beautiful weather while you're freezing, but nevertheless, one of the reasons we came here is to do some night photography, and just beautiful skies out here. Astrophotography, very simply, is photography based on using astronomy, and can range everywhere from very simple to very complicated. One of the challenges you have is you're taking pictures of stars that aren't real bright, and they're moving, so there's a lot of challenges for that. You can get started with something as simple as a lens and a camera and a tripod, which are shown right over here. You can see them sitting over here on the bench. Right here. Here's the tripod, and then you mount your ball head on here. You mount your camera body, and then to it you attach a lens. Now you can, for galaxies, and not galaxies, I'm sorry, for Milky Way shots, all you need is something like a very relatively inexpensive wide-angle lens, like a Rokinon. I think they're like, what are they, 14 millimeters, and
24.
And about a 2.4 f-stop, so it's a very fast lens. Now, when you get into astrophotography, when you're wanting to look at the galaxy, nebula, star clusters, things like that, you need to get a more powerful lens, such as the one shown here, which is one of Kathy's lenses, a Canon lens. This one is a 28 to 300 millimeter, which would work just fine. Usually, for galaxies, star clusters, nebula, you need something in the range of 200 to 400 millimeters, and that's a fairly wide view of the galaxy, of the night sky. So with that's your simplest system. A lot of times you already have all this equipment, so you can get started right away. Now the problem you're going to have is that you're only going to be able probably to shoot for 20, maybe 30 seconds at the most. And for night photography, the other thing you have to do is you have to take multiple shots, and then you have to stack these images to boost the image quality and reduce the noise. And it works quite well. Now, more recently, there's been a lot of new developments in this industry. It's just kind of revolutionary. I got interested when we did the solar eclipse, and I kind of really had a lot of fun with that. I got some good pictures like that. I'd like to get started in astrophotography. Usually they say you should start simple and just do astronomy with a telescope, but I said, no, I want to jump in and do astrophotography right away. So now I'm going to talk about what you need for doing that. And as I mentioned, you could do it this way, but you really need something called a mount, which helps to rotate the camera so you can take longer exposures, and it's just a much simpler system. The mounts tend to be, for the larger cameras, are huge, very expensive, but recently there's been some new developments that I'd like to talk about that are very portable, something you can take on a vacation trip and use. So I'd like to move over here now and show you this equipment. Now that helps to move your camera. There's two companies that are starting to make these. One is the SkyGuider Pro.
What'd I do?
9.
Seems like it just paused.
From iOptron, which is an American company. It's the one I have. There's another one called the Star Adventure that's also very popular, and that is, I believe, made by a Chinese company, but it's a pretty good instrument as well. These cost on the order of $400 or something. So how do they work? What you do is, there's a motor in here, and you turn it on, and the motor rotates and ships up with the star. Now, that motion is called the right ascension. You can think of it, right ascension, as celestial longitude. So it's moving around the celestial sphere in this direction. It does not automatically adjust what is called the declination, which is the celestial latitude. But usually you don't usually need to adjust it that much. And you can solve that problem by using what is known as a star tracker, which we'll talk about, which is another piece of equipment that you can use. So what you do is you go ahead and you need a base to mount this in. And the base looks something like this. The equipment from both of the companies, they do send you one, but this one is a lot higher quality base, and I got this from William Optics. And what it does is it helps to mount. You got a sturdier mount here, a clamp to hold your camera and other devices. But the big thing with this is you have to set this up so that you're at the right. You have to look up your latitude and longitude in the area you're photographing, and you need to set the latitude to match the little scale on here by moving and adjusting some clamps and things. And also, there is something to adjust the right ascension on this side, and you do that in polar alignment step, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So the way this works, you mount this on your tripod, and then you mount the star tracker and the clamp like this, and then you have to mount your camera and lens, and in order to do that, you simply take and mount this on the surface, and then following that on your tripod, you can mount your lens, like so, on top of all of the device. We're going to show you a picture of it all assembled. And this is a lens from William Optics that I recently purchased. It's a 250 millimeter lens. It's designed specifically for astrophotography, which is really nice. And on this you can see it's got a base where you can mount another little tiny telescope called the star tracker. And that, as I mentioned, is used to do a really fine adjustment, which you get beautiful 30-second, 1-minute shots, because this is tracking and keeping it focuses on a star, and it adjusts the right ascension on your tracker. And it looks like this. And you do need another little camera. It's called a guide camera. They aren't too much money. You mount this on this, and then that gets all hooked up to a computer to do the guiding and adjustments. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means you also need a computer. And any laptop will do. They all provide the software. Softwares are all free. and you need a laptop to take with you, which is a little bulkier to handle, you'll say, and but here about 3 or 4 years ago there was new developments that are really interesting, and they came up with a Raspberry Pi unit that's only this big, and oh my gosh, this has been a lifesaver. All you can do everything now with this little device. You don't need separate software for this vendor, another set of software. It's all software self-contained in this little Raspberry Pi unit, and you can see there's a wireless network that you can connect in with your phone or a small tablet, a hand-carry tablet. So all of this combined is probably a nice, really flexible devices that will give you, with little frustration, a lot of really nice pictures. And now the next step I'm going to do, we're going to break, and I'm going to assemble all of this and take you through the different steps that you need. Okay, now let's say we're out on site, and what we've done earlier is we've picked our site. We want a place that has as much dark sky as possible, and we selected a target. We've got either a star cluster, a galaxy, maybe a shot of the moon, whatever the case may be. And you do have to do some planning ahead of time of your shoot, and also the number of exposures you want to take and the exposure time. So that's all. Let's say you've done all of that, and now you're on site. It's nice to have a headlamp, one that has a red and a regular light. They usually recommend, so you don't ruin your night sky vision, to use a red lamp. And so now let's say we're here. It's nice too if you can get out there earlier while at dusk so you can see things earlier on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the base. And on the base there's a little bubble level. And you just have to adjust your tripod legs to get the level, get this all level. And you want to point this in the direction of the, let's say right here to the North Star for the polar alignment. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the star tracker, and that just slips into the clamp. We've done that. And now the next thing to do is to mount the clamp for the actual camera and lens. And you do have to put weights on here so that this is balanced, so you don't put as much stress on the motor. And now I'm going to mount this onto the star tracker. And now you see how it's moving around, so your lens is up here and it'll be automatically moving. But there's a clutch, and you just have to tighten the clutch and that'll hold it in place. You want to make sure everything's nice and tight, all the clamps. And normally I use 2 weights, but I'm just going to put one on here for discussion. And there's a stop right here that you always want to be sure to do, so that if this would slip, it stops and it doesn't fall on your foot. Okay. Now we've done that, and the next thing is to mount our camera, our lens. This is nice and compact. This lens cap just screws off. And then this mounts into this one. And now we have to attach our camera body. And usually it has to have a certain backstop, so you'll have to find some little lens adapters. That comes with the, these all come with the camera. And over here is the declination. This is how you can adjust your declination when you're out on site. And there's a little clamp on this. Once you find it, you stop it. And then you just mount your camera. Finally, I said there was a star tracker with a different camera. And this is very small and compact, doesn't weigh very much. You place this inside this Dixon clamp. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have to release the clutch and you have to balance this so it's nice and balanced. And you just do that by adjusting this weight until it's there. You see right there, that's fairly good. No hands. It stops. Now, you have to go ahead and connect. I'm going to step out of the frame for just a minute. There's various cables you have to connect. This cable is connected right here onto the main camera. And then this gets connected here to the Raspberry Pi unit right here. You just stick this in here. This. And then you have to power it, so you need to have a battery, a spare battery, and you hook that up. You turn this on, and then it connects to the wireless through a tablet. I usually use a little cheap Lenovo tablet to do that. And then on the back of this camera, the guide camera, you connect another cable into here. You can connect it directly to this camera so they work in tandem with each other. And that's pretty much all you, and then you also have to connect like a regular phone cable from here, this to the actual mount right here. There's on the front of it, there's a connection right here, right here, that adjusts and does the guiding on there. So what do? Once you've done all this, there's several steps. The first thing you have to do is get your focus correctly. And William Optics is really nice because they give you something called a batten-off mask. And it's just a device that creates what's a ray, and you've got 3 little rays. And what you want to do is get the rays to balance. And you can kind of think my hand is going this direction, in the single ray in the front. And you just try to get equal arms distances on each, and then you know you're sharply focused. And that just sits on the front of the lens. So you pick any star in the night sky you want to do this. And this just slips over the front of the lens in order to do that. Okay, so now you've focused. The next step is to polar align. And what you have to do there is you have to go ahead and adjust roughly. You want to be roughly centered at the North Star. And then on your tablet, you just go ahead and do something called polar alignment. And what you have to do is it'll tell you which way to adjust the altitude or the declination, and then it'll also tell you how to adjust your right ascension using these 2 little devices right here. So now you are polar aligned right on the center, and now you have to know, well, one thing, a lot of these more expensive mounts, you can have what's called go-to focusing, which you tell it you want a star and it'll automatically rotate. But for this device, you have to kind of know where in the night sky your star, your galaxy is located. It's not too hard to find them. There's lots of points and tips on how to find them. But let's just say my star was out in that direction, and I would have to do is release the clutch, move that over this way, and then rotate this, I'm going to say this over there. So this looks better. So now I'm roughly focused on my star. And what I can do then, if I'm with my tablet, I'm looking at my tablet, and I can see where my target is on my tablet. And I might have to adjust it just a little bit, but there's 2 little push buttons on the Star Adventure that will move it back and forth on the right ascension, and then you can very finely tune the declination with this to get it right in the center of your picture, which you're viewing. So, and now you're ready to take pictures, and all you have to do is on your tablet, set your exposure time, how many pictures you want to take, and finally, there's a setup for the star tracker. It's right on the tablet to start the star tracker. It'll find a random star right around the one to your target, and you'll do a little calibration on it, and then you start that. And now you're ready to take pictures. And what's happening is this is adjusting the position of the telescope so it's dead on, right on your target, and it'll keep it on target the whole night long. And then you can set up your schedule, set run, and then typically wait 1 or 2 hours to collect multiple photos. So that's how it's all done. And it's a fun, very technical process, but once you get into it, you get really infatuated with everything.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for this introduction to astrophotography. We will break with this, and then people can answer questions, and you can go into any more detail that you think.
Yes, and I'll provide, Kathy will provide a list of the costs for everything.
Yeah, there'll be a list of the equipment and the cost for anyone who's interested in this form of photography. So thank you, Mike, so much.
Bye,
Enjoy.
everybody.
Wow. Okay. The list that we talked about, we did not put that together, so we'll do that before I actually do this. So Mike, do you want to take over?
You're muted, Mike.
Mike.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to mention, I showed a special astrophotography camera on the back end, but you can get a adapter, and you can use your regular camera for this as well. So you don't have to have a special astrophotography camera. You can use your regular camera with a lens attached. And you can use this ASI Air also with your regular camera, and it's really greatly just revolutionized how easy it is now to do astrophotography compared to what it was like before. It's a small little Raspberry Pi computer in a small box, and it's offered by ZWO. It's a Chinese company that specializes in CMOS cameras for astrophotography. And it was developed by a guy named Sam Wen, who was an amateur photographer. And he's built himself a really good business with really good cameras. And the Raspberry Pi is nice since it replaces a laptop and several pieces of different software in one small package. If you look over to the right at the bottom picture, on the top, you see all those cables going off all your equipment, and you see somebody has to sit at a little desk with your computer and a mouse. And what you have now, if you look at the bottom, is a very simplified cabling, and you can control everything from your phone or your, I've got a little cheap little tablet, Android tablet to do it. And it also, as I mentioned, you can control some Canon and Nikon DSLR cameras. And it gets very quite interesting. If you get a bigger telescope with a mount that has what they call go-to capability, which means you just select a star, say go to it, and those mounts will automatically just center right on the picture, all within the Raspberry, in the ASI Air. And it'll also control your guide camera. And it also provides 4 power outlets, so you can power a dew heater. And it also will save all your raw files, and you can ask it even to do stacking. So if you look up at the top picture on the right, you can see there's storage within the camera. It has a dual band antenna, very easy to use interfaces, which I'll show you. It monitors your power. You can do deep sky object imaging. You can also do planetary imaging, auto guiding, and a lot of people will just set this thing up, go in the house, go to bed, get up in 3 or 4 hours, and it's all done. So it's pretty amazing. Kathy, could you go to the next slide? Here's some of the Canon and Nikon cameras that it supports. So you can see it's a lot of the Canon upper end cameras, and you can see all the Nikon models that it supports. Next page. Okay, so what's the procedure? I kind of showed that earlier. You connect your phone or tablet to the ASI Air, and you input the focal length of your camera, and I think there's one other thing I can't remember what. Anyway, it's fairly standard. The camera model, and then the focal length, and then you go ahead and focus any star. You just pick a bright star, and you focus your lens and lock it. And actually, you could even get one of these batten-off for your camera. William Optics provides one. It's just the little plastic disc that you can put on your camera. Then you polar align. After you polar align, you move to the target and set up your auto guider. And finally, you have you can do this all ahead of time. You set up how many photos you want to take, and also you start how many you want to take, and you set up your exposure time on it and your gain on the camera or your ISO, and then you begin taking your pictures. Now, a lot of in astrophotography, you also like to take a sequence of other photos to get really, really good pictures. And these are called the bias, flats, and dark frames. And you can do a lot of these ahead of time. And these are used to reduce the stacking, the noise during the stacking process. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. If you go to the left screen there, can you see that on the line of little tabs from the bottom, go up one, and you see that little red one in the middle? Kathy, can you point to it? Yeah, right there. That's the ASI Air. You push that and you're off, you start. And then if you look on my tablet, to the left, you put in your latitude and longitude. And to the right, you tell it what kind of mount you have. In this case, it would be an off-camera ST4. You put in your main scope focal length and your guide scope focal length, and then your two types of cameras. And next slide. This is now when you're doing your focusing. So if you look over to the right where it says preview, that little yellow orange, Kathy, can you see that? Point at it. Yeah. No, over to the right. That preview there, down. Yeah, right there. That's where you take a picture with your thing. You just set that up for preview. You push the circle and it takes a picture. And you can see up to the upper right corner, that's the image you get from a batten-off mask. And you can see how the angles between the center ray are equal. Now you're really sharply focused. And actually, there on the other side of that little white dot at the top, there's the exact same image. So it's like an X. It's two X's with a line through them to help you focus. Next slide. Okay, this is polar alignment. And what you try to do is, there's some instructions. You first set up your scope, roughly pointing at the North Star. It takes a picture. Then it tells you to move it like about 90 degrees. So you move it 90 degrees, you take another picture. And then it tells you how much you're off of those two little green arrows. So you just adjust those, the up and down and the right and left, until you get that blue circle right in the center of the white circle. And the other
Mike,
thing,
a quick question.
Yes.
For the polar alignment, can you do the polar alignment with the ASI Air using just the regular star
Yes.
tracker, or do you don't need to go to that?
yes, I use this. I use the ASI Air.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's just kind of nice because you can use your camera to do it. You don't need to buy a separate alignment, polar alignment camera.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. Next slide. So now you're polar aligned, and then the other thing you have to do, you move to the target, and now you set up your auto guider. And at the top there, you see that little circle with the cross in it. That's what you push. And then what it does, it's automatically selects a star in that picture. And it takes about 2 or 3 minutes for it to get all synced up. And then you can see on the left, it shows you the picture that your guide star and how sharp it is. And then it begins guiding, and it tries to keep your camera on the blue line right in along that center line. Now it only does the right ascension, as I mentioned earlier, so that the red line, it just goes where it wants to go. If you're pretty well polar aligned, it'll be up there, but you know, you do get a little shaking from the wind and stuff. So sometimes it does go off scale, but you just don't worry about it too much because it's the blue line you're worried about. And you see the little squares on the right above the blue line and below the blue line. Those are the adjustments that it's making to the star guider. Next slide. Then this is where you can set up your settings and how many pictures you want to take. So you can see on the right side, that's my shooting schedule. It has 2 lights there because in the pictures I took this off of, this is for what they call a monochrome camera. So you have a red, green, and blue setting for the lights. But normally if you have a one-shot color camera or your regular camera, you just need 1 light. And then you can select to take some darks at the same time. And next slide. So anyway, this is the setup, the auto sequence, and I began taking pictures. And on the left, I show you, this is a picture of Orion. And I was using the SkyGuider Pro. I didn't have an auto guider at this time. I was having a little trouble figuring this all out when I first started using it. And I took a 60-second exposure. I took about 70 shots. And you can see that the stars are a little bit blurry. They're not quite as real sharp, tack sharp that you'd like to have. But on the right, you can see once I was using the auto guider, I reduced my exposure to 47 seconds. And then I got a really beautiful picture there. You can see the stars are all tack sharp. They're nice and circular, no star trails or anything on them. Next slide. So post-processing. A lot of astrophotographers like to use a file format, and it's called a FITS format. It was set up years ago by astronomers. And this is, for example, this is used on the Hubble telescope. And the ASI Air, it only generates FITS files. But you can stack these FITS files using most stacking programs. And there's a program called FITS Liberator that allows you actually export the red, green, and blue TIFF files. And then you can load those into Photoshop to generate a composite RGB TIFF file. It's pretty simple. You can use Photoshop, and there is a step procedure. There's a lot of good videos you can see how to do it, but you tend to want to do a lot of curve adjustments. You do a curve adjustment, you reset your black and white points, you do another curve adjustment, but it's all spelled out in a lot of good videos. There's another and more powerful package that these people that they use, astronomers use, astrophotographers use, called PixInsight, which is designed specifically for just astrophotography. It's really pretty powerful. And finally, it's even possible to use a monochrome camera. And there you photograph red, green, and blue images. And if you look online, you can see a lot of amateurs that do this, and their pictures with this monochromes are just amazing, the different colors they can bring out. Next slide. Okay, this is results I got recently. This is the Orion Nebula using that CMOS camera. And you can see what I was able to, after doing a little bit, it took me about an hour, 2 hours of fiddling around in Photoshop to get exactly what I wanted. in there. And so I was pretty happy with this. I've been working on this for about a year, and now I got the system down. It's working really well. And next slide. There's a lot of packages you can buy. This one's really cheap. It's like $20, and it's got all kinds of adjustments it'll do in Photoshop. And if you look at you see the little diffraction patterns, it's added to the stars down there. That's some of the things and tricks you can do on there. But so a lot of work, a lot of time, but that's a pretty nice shot of Orion. So in summary, I just wanted to show you how automated you can make things now. And they're portable enough that I can pack everything pretty much in one suitcase. And I just take that on board with me. It gets a little heavy, but it's not horribly bad. I would recommend really getting a star guider if you want to get tack sharp photos. But you don't have to. If you know what Kathy showed, you can just add the Star Guider Pro to get started, and it kind of lets you see if you would like to spend more time and effort on developing your skills, and of course, always spending more money as well. And if you have any information, just contact me. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, I think that's it, Kathy, isn't it?
Okay. Do anyone have questions for Mike?
Now, I'd just like to say that took a huge amount of effort to get that cool photograph.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
It's a challenge. It's fun, though. It's a technical challenge. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but cool photograph.
Yeah.
Mike, do you ever have any trouble with the TSA trying to, with that bag of heavy metal equipment, taking it off?
No. Oh, the one thing you don't want to do, you want to take out the weight.
Yeah.
You're made out of iron. So I always put them in a little bag and I set them out. The rest of the stuff is aluminum. And for some reason, all that aluminum doesn't upset them, but that iron, yeah, that really does.
Yeah, you look like a mine.
Yeah.
This works really well because if you take that as carry-on, then your wife can put more clothes in your suitcase. So you're not carrying.
She does.
Yeah.
But she carries my batteries. You need 2 batteries. So
Yeah, when we're on United, right now we have 70 pounds, but flying Hawaiian, we have 50. So in Hawaii, we arrived in Big Island. We flew Hawaiian Airlines to Kauai and then the Big Island, and I'm sitting there I have a little portable luggage weigh, and I'm sitting there weighing things, and I got the suitcases to 50 and the carry-ons were like 2 pounds more. Well, the customer service ticket agent decided that she's going to weigh everything, so then she put our carry-ons. Oh, this is too much, so I'm trying to figure out how to so I had one of those vests,
Yeah.
I started putting stuff in the vests, and I mean, it's just ridiculous. So you really do have to pack per the airline with the lowest weight requirements. Because
and there's just that, there are numerous numbers of targets. Like this is a book I use here. You probably can't read, but it says Astrophotography Targets for Beginners on there. So
Okay.
there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, we can put that in the final, Mike, under the references if they're interested.
Wow.
So anyway, we're coming to the end of this, and as I mentioned before, there's a solar eclipse that is coming April 8th to 2024. It's going to the line that shows the longest eclipse goes right close to Fredericksburg. So if the club wants to do a trip to there, I would say a year ahead of time, get reservations somewhere and be prepared to move, because we went to South Carolina for the last solar eclipse. And we had it all set up in one location, and the clouds moved in, but the clouds were gone, 30 miles up north of us. So we just got in the car and went and ended up in a high school parking lot with a number of other people that had just happened to be there. So you don't need a special place. You just need a place that's open so that you can follow the sun as it gets to its zenith. And then we didn't do on the back end, we just did. And so the picture that's here, I think is one that Mike took with the diamond ring. Is that what it's called, Mike?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So it's quite, I mean, it is an amazing thing. And about a year ahead of time, we'll do another workshop specifically for solar eclipse, because there are certain things that you need to get for your cameras and stuff that you need to get them early. They run out of this stuff. The people next to us were from New York, and he did it on a spur of the moment, and he couldn't find obviously any of the solar filters, which you have to have, otherwise you burn your camera sensor. So he was putting the little solar eyeglasses that you're supposed to use for looking at the, he was putting that on his lens. I have no idea if his camera survived or not, but, and then there was the guy who had something similar to Mike's with the alignment and stuff. He was taking it out of the box. He had never even used it. And he's looking at us with our cameras going, hey, do you know how to work this? We're going like, oh, yeah. No, don't know how to do that. So we're going to start thinking a year ahead of time, and make reservations early. If you can't go, you can always cancel, but you got to have the reservations, and then we'll go from there. But this is an opportunity that we should not miss as a club. And then there's the lunar eclipse, which is coming up very quickly, May 15th to the 16th. And this is where we will look at photo pills in Fredericksburg, because you can see where the moon is going. So you can, I mean, it's a very, very powerful tool. So we'll look at that, but you can, and the totality will actually last an hour and 24 minutes, which is a long time. So those are two things, but I mean, check astrology books, and even Farmer's Almanac has what's coming in the stars. You've got meteors, you've got all kinds of other stuff going on, but those are the two events that I think we should look forward to. So what's in the back of this? These are the internet planning apps, the photo pills tutorial, check off lists, and apps for computer home. So these, I talked about these prior. So these are things that will be in the PowerPoint, and you can look at them. This is pretty much step-by-step from the video, the YouTube video by Brenda. So you can see all the different screens and stuff. I can't really encourage you to get photo pills anymore earnestly. And then these are location, planning the Milky Way shoot, things to think about, review your what you're looking at, and of course, weather report, local report. And there's another app, Mike, is it called Clear Skies, that you use to determine the amount of dew and clouds and stuff in the sky? There's another one that he uses, and I think it's called Clear Skies.
I think it's Clear Outside.
Maybe, yeah. So set up reminders for your camera, and then the check off list before walking out the door. And very important, if you go with a friend or tell someone where you're going and when you're back, and leave coordinates if you're going into the bush. You never know. Always be prepared. So these are sources. We will update the sources to include Mike's information and information about his equipment. And then there is so much information. Every time I do one of these, I start reading a different book, or I watch a different YouTube, and some of it's the same, but there's always someone says, oh, I've got this tip and I've got this tip. So do your homework, prepare, plan. I think Chris Summers can probably give us all a course on how to prepare for a photo shoot, because he certainly has, his photos really show, especially the ones that the practice that he has had, and just thinking about it. He always does a walk around or a drive around. We went to Fredericksburg. He was going around and saying, hey, I found this site, and we went in on a road, look, let's take a look at over here. So he would be a very good person to talk to you about, like, how do you do this? But it's you're curious and you want to see, well, what does it look like from this side? So, and I hope you enjoyed what we gave you today. I hope you can, use some of the information. And for all of you that are going to to Fredericksburg that are on the site. If you could send me another email and let me know that what your plans are and going, because as I said, earlier, my emails have been acting really wonky lately, and I'm not sure that I've got all of them. So I would like to double check. So I will send it out into a news article and put it on the Facebook. But for all of the that are here, just go ahead and send me an email so that I know for sure and can start putting together the list and what we need to do. So, and send it to president@kingwoodcable.com. So that's it. This
Kathy?
is just one more thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I told you, I got the little star tracking device called Move, Shoot, Move that was being featured on a lot of like Instagram and Facebook feeds as in advertising. I thought I'll go give it a try. So my wife got me one. I'll be at the far end away from Mike because I'll have this little star tracker.
You know what, Tris? I bought that same one a couple years ago and I could never figure out how to use it. So we'll both be bracketing him to get him to help us to figure it out, because that's the other thing I want to do is learn how to use that.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a try. I played with it, but it's always challenging to find good stars in Kingwood. But I need to get out and play with it one night and do some test runs.
Yeah. So,
hey, Kathy,
Uh-huh.
for those of us that are going to go to Fredericksburg, are you then taking that list and then plan, say, like a call together to
Yeah,
review?
definitely.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
gone until the 17th of March.
Mhm.
So it will be right after we get back from Utah. That's why I need to get this list together so I can put together. And I also am going to contact the Hampton Inn and see if they have a room that we can actually meet in and really go through some of this stuff, like the day before, the day of or before, talk about schedules. And I think Chris was going early. We already know one place where we'll probably start, where the last place that we took pictures at, near the walking, where the trails that walk up to the Enchanted Rock, that's probably we'll definitely go there. And then the next night we may change somewhere else, but you do have to, and I will send this out sooner than later, that you do have to reserve a ticket to get in there, unless they've changed the rules. But as of last year, you had to reserve. So that's going to go out soon. So, and then I think Margaret, you said that you were going to drive and you were looking for someone who wanted to ride with you going to Fredericksburg, but you could only go one way because you're going somewhere else afterwards. Maybe she dropped off.
Yeah, she dropped off, Kathy.
Okay. Anyway, Margaret said that she was driving, so she was looking if somebody wanted to go one way with her, but needed to have a ride back with someone else. I don't know how that would work, but anyway.
They can hitchhike.
So anyway, thank you.
Kathy, I have a question.
Yeah.
I've tried photo pills before and it's egregiously confusing.
Uh-huh.
What YouTube videos have you been watching to try to make some sense of it?
Watch the one by Brenda.
Okay.
And are you coming to Fredericksburg?
Yes.
Oh, great. So watch that one. Anyone who's going to Fredericksburg, I would recommend you watch that just to get it. And then we will walk through photo pills together. I am not the expert with photo pills. I am still learning a lot, but I love the augmented reality where you can put in the parameters, the date and the time, and you can scroll and you can actually see the Milky Way going up. When we were in Hawaii, very dark skies, Milky Way didn't come up until like 4 in the morning. I had 1 hour, and you're trying to figure out, if you don't know the stars, like Sagittarius, whatever, with the photo pills, you go into augmented reality and you find southeast, and you start playing with it, and here it comes right up the horizon. So you can be dead on with where the Milky Way is.
Yeah. Well, there's another app I use called Stellarium. It's just an app for dummies. It does the same thing. I hold my phone up and just point it to where I want it to go, and it'll show me what's there.
Yeah.
I use Stellarium too. It's
each app has a little different thing. Photo pills, I've started using it, and I haven't used Solarium, so I'm more familiar with PhotoPills, but whatever works for you, whatever gets you pointed in the right direction is awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, John, one other thing, there's on PhotoPills, there's a little, you can see it, Academy button at the top.
Oh yeah.
It'll give you a lot of how-to articles, and it'll also have some of their own videos.
Okay.
And actually, the first one I clicked on had some night sky stuff on it. So
Okay.
So
Thanks, Tim.
so you have used you're using PhotoPills, Tim.
yes,
Excellent.
I'm no expert, but I try and I look in there to figure out what I need to use.
Yeah, I know. And the guy has an accent, and sometimes I really cannot understand what he's saying because he talks very fast too.
Yeah.
So that's why I like Brenda. Brenda's
Yeah, go with that.
English and she talks slow, and she's got, so watch those, and I think that should help.
Okay.
Anyway, it has been fun giving this for you. I'm hoping that when I get back from Utah, maybe some of the unusual types of star photography I will have tried and either succeeded or not, and we'll maybe try again in Enchanted Rock. And you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can do too. Maybe you can, I'm sure you can teach me things in a year or two that I had no idea. So thank you all. Mike, thank you for helping me.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank
really
you.
excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have one question.
Great,
Do you-
Kathy,
do
thanks.
you have-
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Mike.
You're
Do you
welcome.
have some links on the Photo Club website to some of your references? I guess I thought
Or a PowerPoint, this PowerPoint.
Oh, this will be on there. I will have to put the video separate because this will be a PDF.
Yeah.
And the PDF will, now I can send you a Word document that will have the links, because the PDF will lose the links. So
Well, Kathy, just send me that Word document. I can post it on the website with the links and stuff if you want.
oh, sure. Yeah, I can do
yeah,
that.
that'd be really great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have fun in Utah.
Oh, yeah, if I'm not freezing. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye,
Thank you very
everybody.
much. Bye.
You're welcome.